My name is Dr. Michael Crowley, and I'm a research associate with the Omega Research Foundation. In 2005, the European Union adopted the legally binding EU anti-torture regulation, prohibiting trade in inherently abusive goods and restricting export of certain law enforcement equipment that could be misused for torture. In 2021, the Council of Europe introduced similar politically binding guidance for all its member states. And the African Committee on Human and People's Rights adopted a resolution in 2020 and now encourages effective national implementation. Whilst all these regional measures are important advances, they are limited and, for example, do not currently address the trade in standard batons and shields. And outside these regions, the majority of states have at best a patchwork of export regulations covering a limited range of relevant goods, but which do not adequately address this issue. Consequently, law enforcement equipment, including handheld kinetic impact weapons, continues to be traded without adequate regulation in many parts of the world. And inherently abusive equipment, like spike batons, is still being manufactured and marketed. All states now need to introduce effective, comprehensive national regulations on this trade that prohibit and prevent the manufacture, export, and import of inherently abusive law enforcement equipment and weapons, as well as abusive and dangerous handheld kinetic impact weapons, such as spike batons. This would include, for example, body-worn and direct contact electric shock devices and inherently degrading or painful restraints. This prohibition must apply to all imports and exports, irrespective of whether they are undertaken by individuals, companies, or states. And states should destroy any stock of such prohibited equipment discovered within their jurisdiction. All states must also strictly control the export and import of equipment and weapons that can have a legitimate law enforcement function but can be readily misused, like standard batons, as well as ordinary police handcuffs, riot control agents such as tear gas, electric shock projectile weapons, and rubber and plastic bullets. All transfers should require government authorization following a human rights risk assessment, and no law enforcement equipment should be supplied to recipients likely to use them for torture, other ill treatment, or other human rights violations. But national measures alone, though vital, will never be sufficient to ensure that law enforcement agencies engaged in torture and other ill treatment will not continue to receive weapons and equipment from countries that lack effective national trade controls. So concerted action by states working in cooperation with partners through regional organizations to develop common standards can help to combat such activities. And the ongoing process in the United Nations also provides all states the unique opportunity to establish international standards in this area for the first time. In the last few years, there's been a growing recognition that states need to collectively regulate the trade in law enforcement weapons as part of the global fight against torture. And momentum is now building for concerted international action in this area. In 2017, the European Union, Argentina, and Mongolia launched the Alliance for Torture-Free Trade, which currently comprises over 60 states from all world regions who are dedicated to act together to further prevent, restrict, and end trade of goods used in torture, other ill treatment, and the death penalty. In 2019, through the efforts of the Alliance and its supporters, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution triggering a formal UN process to examine the feasibility and nature of possible common international standards on torture-free trade. The first step, a survey of states' views, showed that most responding states supported the establishment of common international standards through a legally binding instrument. A group of governmental experts has now been established to explore options for establishing common international standards and will deliver its findings in 2022 to the UN General Assembly. And states must then decide collectively what is to be done. All states have a responsibility to prevent torture and therefore must act decisively to bring this global trade under control. The current UN process provides a once-in-a-generation opportunity for them to do so. Amnesty International and Omega are now calling upon all states to support the creation of a global, legally binding instrument that prohibits the trade in inherently abusive equipment and strictly controls the trade in standard law enforcement equipment to ensure it is never sent to those who will use it for torture.